What is up, guys? Welcome to another crash course, and in this crash course we're gonna learn Redux. Alright, so if you're just a beginner with React or doing some React stuffs, then you might have heard of Redux. Okay, so Redux basically is a state management library or a state management system. Alright, which means that if your application is very large and very big, then it's very difficult to handle state if there are lots and lots of components. All right, and at that point of time, Redux kind of makes things much simple, because in Redux all the state are actually stored in a single place, all right, which is called a store, and all the components can actually get access to that store. Now, just to notify you that Redux is not a part of React. Okay, Redux in itself is a separate library. Now it can work with Angular or any JavaScript framework, but React and Redux are popular combination nowadays, right? And especially for beginners, if you're just starting out with Redux, things might get a little bit overwhelming and difficult, all right, because there are lots of new things that you're going to be learned in Redux. So I'm going to make things very simple for you in this crash course, all right, and help you understand Redux in the fastest way possible. So let's get started. Now, as I said earlier, Redux is a state management system, all right, which means that Redux helps in handling your state and managing your state. All right, now it's very important to know the major concepts and the mechanism of Redux and how Redux works. All right, so as I said earlier, the application state is actually stored in a single place in Redux, which is called a store. Now, store is a variable. Okay, it's an object which consists of other methods as well, but it also contains your state. Now, let's understand the mechanism of Redux with an example. Let's say you have a data, and the data is John Doe. All right, and let's say that you want to store that data in your state. Okay, so how are you going to do that with the help of Redux? So let's say in our view, in our user interface, we have a button. All right, so when we click the button, we want our data, which is the John Doe, to be stored in our state. Okay, so when we click that button, all right, an action will be created. Now, an action is nothing but an object. Right? Now that object has a property of type and sometimes a data. In our case, the type is add. Now the action type tells what type of action should be done. All right? If that type is delete, then the delete action should be done. If the type is add, then add action should be done. All right? So right now we have the type of add, and we also have the data, which is the John Doe. So by clicking the button, an action will be created, and then it is dispatched to the store, or it is sent to the store. Now the store receives the action, and remember, the store also has the state. All right, so it receives the action and sends the action along with the state to the reducer. All right, the reducer gets the state and action, and depending on the type of action, in our case add, it will update the state. Okay, which means that it will add the John Doe to our state. Now it does not do it directly, because state cannot be changed directly. Okay, so what this reducer will do is, depending on the action and your previous state, it will create a new state and send that state to your store. Now this store again receives the new state, and then it sends the new state to our view, and that new state now contains John Doe, and it can be seen in our view. All right, so you create an event handler, for example a button. You click that button, an action will be created, and then it is sent to store. The store sends the action along with the state to the reducer. Reducer receives that, and depending on the action type and the data, it will actually create a new state, send back to store, and store will send the new state to our view. So yeah, this is the flow of data in Redux. Now if you are not understanding anything, that's fine. When we're gonna code, you'll actually get used to it. Okay, Redux itself is not something that you want to understand right after you've learned. Okay, it really takes time. Believe me, it really takes time in order to understand Redux. But I do want you to actually know some terms here. All right, for example, action dispatch, store, and reducer. Okay, these are the four, I think, the four important terms that you need to know in Redux. Alright, so that's the mechanism of Redux, and let's get started with our code. Okay, so right now I've created a folder called Redux app, and inside this folder I have already created the React boilerplate. Alright, now at this point I do hope that you guys know a little bit of React, okay, in order to learn Redux. If you don't know React, then I do have a crash course on React as well, so go there, do check it out, and do come back again. So yeah, I've created my React boilerplate, and right now nothing is being displayed here. That's because in our source folder, let's go to app.js, I have actually removed everything except for this div of class name app. Alright, now if I go to public and index.html, I have actually added a CDN, bootstrap CDN, because I'm going to use a little bit of bootstrap classes here and there. Alright, and I've also added a Google font, alright, which is Nunito right here. So yeah, those two I have added, and the rest is actually pretty much the same. So let me go to index.js right here, and let's close that up to make a little bit of space. Okay, and I've also started the server here. All right. Okay, so we did look at the React mechanism at a glance, but now we're actually going to code that out. Okay, so always remember that React is a state management system. All right, and its main function is to manage or handle your state. So the first priority should be our state. And as I said earlier, all the application state is actually stored in a single place, which is called a store. All right. Now, in order to create a store, you need a function, all right, which is called create store, and that function you can get from the React library. All right. So first, we will actually install the React library. So let's go here, because Redux is not a part of React. All right, Redux is a separate thing. You can use that with Angular and other JavaScript frameworks. All right. So in here, let's just say npm install Redux, and if you enter it, then the Redux library will be installed. All right. I've already install Redux, that's why I'm not doing that. So install Redux, and the first thing we're going to do is create a store. All right, and for that you need a create store method. So let's import that. Import create store from Redux. All right, and let's create our store here. Let's comment store. Now store is nothing but a variable. Okay, so const store equals to create store function. All right, simple as that. And inside this function, it will expect an argument, and that argument is a reducer. All right, so basically this is how you create a store. Now if you actually save it, you'll probably get an error, and that's because a reducer is not defined. Okay, the compiler does not know what this reducer is. All right, so let's create that reducer as well. So reducer, and reducer is nothing but a function. All right, so function reducer, and as I said earlier, it takes two parameters. One is the state, and the second one is the action. Now we also need to initialize our state. All right, so in order to initialize, we can do state equals to an object like this, but I do want to keep things clean, so I'm going to create a variable called const initial state equals to, let this be an object, and inside that I want a property of user, and let's set that to an array. All right, it's similar to how you define state in your components. All right, and here let me just add state equals to initial state. All right, so what we're doing here is just initializing our state. Now you always have to initialize the state at first in Redux. All right, so now the reducer has the state and also the action, but again action is not defined, so let's also create an action here. So action, and basically action is nothing but an object, and it has one property called type, which just tells what type of action it is. All right, right now I just want to add a data inside this user. All right, so I'm gonna set the type to add, and I also want to add the data. All right, so for the value equals to, and let's say John Doe. All right, so I created an action of type add and value John Doe, and I want to add this John Doe inside our user property. All right, okay, so now the action is defined, and this action is basically this right here. Okay, so in our reducer, first we have to check the type of the action. Okay, but because the reducer's work is to check the type of the action, and depending on that action perform some operations. All right, now in order to check the action type, okay, you can do that with if, or you can do that with switch. Okay, so I'm gonna go for switch. So switch, say action dot type, and remember action dot type is add right here. So let's say case add. All right, which means that if the action dot type is add, then whatever the code that we write here is going to run. All right, right now we're not going to write any code. We're just going to say add to state. All right, and we also want a default value in case this switch case or is in case the case doesn't match, then we're gonna just return the state. Let me save that. Says const action type. Oh, sorry about that. It should be this colon, not equals to, because I'm inside an object. Now let's see. All right, no errors. So far so good. So let me recapitulate what I've done. So I created a store, okay, with the help of create store, which is coming from Redux library. All right, and create store actually expects a parameter, which is the reducer. Okay, and reducer is nothing but a function. It takes the state. All right, at first we have to initialize the state, and it also takes an action. Now action is nothing but an object, and it contains of type. Okay, and type tells what kind of action to be performed, and sometimes it also has a value. Okay, so right now what we want is to add this value inside our user property. All right, and that is basically done by the reducer. Reducer checks the action type. All right, and depending on that type, it will perform some operations. So now let me add this value inside our user. So here let's say return. Now as I said earlier, I keep referring to as I said earlier because of that slideshow that I showed, right? Anyways, as I said earlier, that the reducer will not change the state directly. Okay, it will actually return a new state, and that is being done with the help of a method called object.assign. Okay, so what this will actually take 3 parameters. The first parameter will be an empty object, the second one will be a state, okay, and the third one will also be an object, and inside that object we're going to change the property of the state that needs to be changed. All right, because I want this John Doe to be added inside the user, which means that the user property should be changed. All right, so let's go here and say user, and now since this is an array, we're going to use a concat function. All right, so let's say state dot user dot concat, and inside it let's add action dot value. Okay, and action dot value is nothing but this John Doe. So what this statement is basically doing is adding this John Doe inside the user. and this user property is actually being stored inside this new object, and this object is actually being returned, which means that the reducer is taking the state and returning a new state. All right, now if you save this, and here let me go down to be below store and say window.store equals to store. Okay, and what this will do is actually allow me to use the store and its methods in our console. So let's go here and inspect, because I do want to see my state right now. Okay, so let's go here and say store dot get state, and this will actually give me our current state. Okay, and right now we have user. All right, and inside this user it's empty. Although we created all this, we created the reducer, and we kind of created the code for adding, you know, this John Doe inside the user, right? But still this value has not been added inside this user. Okay, and the state is actually empty. The reason for that is because we have actually missed another important step, and that is the dispatch method. All right, because although you created an action, all right, but this action doesn't directly go inside this reducer. Just because you created an action doesn't mean that it will go directly inside this reducer. You actually have to send this action to your store first, and that store will then send it to reducer. So in order for you to send this action to the store, you have to use the dispatch method. So let's do that. All right, let's go here and say store dot dispatch, and inside it will expect a parameter, and that is action. And if you save it, if you go here and say store dot get state, now you're actually seeing that there is an element inside the array. All right, and if you go here, you have John Doe. Okay, so dispatch is an important step, and don't forget that. You can also relate this with our slide. Okay, so let me just open that slide. Okay, so if you see this flow of data in Redux, no need to don't focus much on view, because we are not actually putting that value inside our view, because for that we need to actually connect React and Redux together. But if you just look at this 3 blocks here, action, store, and reducer, we first created an action right here. All right, then we need to dispatch it to the store. All right, which is done by this code right here, store.dispatch action, and inside it we are sending this action right here. Okay, so what this code is doing is sending this action to the store. All right, now store will send this action along with the state to reducer. Okay, right here, reducer will take the initial state and action, and depending on the type of action, it will perform certain operation, and it will return a new state. All right, and that new state will go back to the store. And that's how, when I used store.getState, I got my state with the new updated data. So this is the basic, you might say principle, whether you say, you know, basic core concept or mechanism, whatever, but this is Redux at a base or at a core. All right, so now we learned the basics of Redux. Now it's time for us to implement Redux in React. All right, so now we're gonna just delete all this code that you can save this code if you want, but I'm gonna remove all this. Not gonna need it. All right, bring this up. Now I'm gonna use an extension called ES7 React-Redux snippets. All right, I think it's called like that. Basically what it does is gives me shortcut keys in order to, you know, code faster. So yeah, basically we're gonna create a simple application, all right, based on React and Redux. Okay, just to help you understand how you can use React and Redux together in order to build an application. Right now you just saw the React basics. Okay, so here as well we're gonna do those same things, but the setup or the boilerplate that we're gonna create is gonna take a little bit time, and there's gonna be a little bit of files here and there. All right, so you might get confused at some points. All right, so If you kind of get confused, rewind the video and then watch it again, rewind the video, then watch it again. All right. Don't just go, serially if you don't understand, okay? Because that's going to make things a lot complicated at the end. So if you're stuck, just pause a bit, think over it, watch it again, and then move on. All right. So again, as I said, React and Redux are two different things, okay? They are not the same. So in order to connect React with Redux, you're going to need another library as well. Now we have Redux, okay, in order to use some methods from the Redux library, but in order to connect React and Redux, we're going to need another library called React-Redux. All right. So in our terminal, what you can do is say npm install React Redux. All right, and press enter, and it will actually install the React Redux library. I already have done that, so I'm not going to do it again. So first, let me create the boilerplate for that app. Okay, it's going to be a simple to-do application. All right, not any, because I don't want to complicate things, because it's just a crash course, and my job right here is to help you understand Redux and how you can create React Redux application together. So let me go to app.js here, and let me create two components. One is create to do, and another one is display to do, to display the to do list. And let's import that here. So import create to do.js, sorry, create to do from /create to do. All right, and we're also gonna import this. Why did I write display to do from /display to do. All right, nothing complicated, just a simple import and just displaying here. So let me create a component folder, components, and inside that folder let me create a file called create to do.js, and also another file that is display to do.js. And now here, if you create to do, if you write rfc and press enter, that will automatically give me our functional component template. All right, so let's cut that out. I don't want export default there. Instead, I want to do it here. Create to do, and let's do the same thing here. So rfc display to do. Seriously, display. So let me change this to rename display to do. Create display model not found countries of create to do. Oh, components / create to do. All right, let me add an h2 here and say Redux to do app. Save that. Saying fail to compile. Oh, all right. Let me just go to app.css, and in our app, what I want to do, instead of text align, I don't want to text align, so let's remove that. And in our app.js, let me just add a class of container here. All right, fair enough. Now let me also create some templates in these components. All right, so in our create to do, what we want is basically an input field and a button in order to type out to do, and just button to add the to do. So let's say form input of type text, class name of form control placeholder of enter to do, and let's close that up, save that. All right, and I also want a button, so let me add a button here. Input type submit, and for the class name let me add btn, let's say secondary, and for the value I'm gonna say submit. Save that up. All right, let me also add a little bit of margin top of 3. There you go. And here let me add a class name of empty, and in our display to do, by default let me just add a raw data and say learn Redux, something like that. All right, let's save that up. Forgot to save that. Okay, so yeah, all the components are working. Now the first thing we're gonna do is create a store. All right, so in our source let's create a folder called store. Okay, again we are just doing the same things that we did earlier. All right, in order to use Redux we're just doing it in a different files, okay, so that it actually becomes organized. So in our store here, let me create a file called index.js. So, and all the things we're going to do what we did earlier. So let's import create store from Redux. All right, and we're going to say const store equals to create store, and here we're just going to pass a reducer, and that reducer's name going to be to do reducer. All right, and let's just export default store, and let's call that import that store in our app.js. So import store from /store, and here you don't even need to say /store /index.js, okay, because index.js is the first thing that it's going to look for. You don't need to do that. So if you save that up, you're probably going to get an error saying to do reducer is not defined, and the reason is because we haven't actually created a reducer. So let's do that. So let's create a folder, not here, let me create a folder here saying reducer, and inside it let's create a to do reducer.js. So a reducer is basically a function, to do reducer, which is going to take a state, and it's also going to take an action. All right, and let's say switch, it's going to look for action.type, and depending on that action.type it's going to do some operations. So let me just add a default case for now. So default, and let me just return state. Right, now we also need to initialize our state. So let's create const initial state equals to, and here let me say to do's, and let this be an array. Okay, now inside I do want to create some raw datas. All right, let it be an object and say id of 1, and let's say to do of learn React, something like that. And let me copy this up. And let me also export default to do reducer. Save that up, and finally let's also call that here. So import to do reducer from, now since we are inside the store, we're gonna go one folder back, so // reducer / to do reducer. All right, now the error is gone. Okay, so we also created our reducer for now, which is basically not doing anything, right? But however, we do have our initial values for our state, okay, even though it's a raw value. So now what you're gonna do is bring that value in our application, all right, which means that now we're gonna connect React and Redux together and use the state which is inside our store of Redux in our React application. Now for that, there are some things that you have to do. Now, although we kind of got this store or imported this store in our app.js, this doesn't mean that we can directly use this store, all right, and we're gonna get that value or data. So the first thing is we need to notify all the components that is present inside your React application that, hey, you can actually use this store in your application. All right, we need to notify them. In order to do that, we need a provider. All right, if you have done context API, then you might be familiar with this process. So we need to import provider from, and this is going to be from React-Redux. All right, remember that we installed React-Redux a little bit earlier, and we need to wrap everything inside this provider. So provider and provider. Okay, oh sorry, I missed the div. All right, and we also need to pass this store here. Okay, so store equals to store, and this store is basically this. Okay, so now all the components, okay, inside your React application will be able to access the store, which means that they will be also be able to access the state, since the state is inside our store. Now we do want to grab the state in our display to do, okay, because we do want to display the data. Now in order to do that, okay, this provider right here in our app just notified that, hey, you can use a store. All right, now in order to use the state that is present in the store, there are a few things we need to do. Okay, basically there are two important things to remember here. One is connect, and the another one is map state to props. Right, so you might be very overwhelmed at this. What? I was just understanding about providers and you're saying this. Okay, but anyways, Redux is like that. Okay, because that's why some people, especially beginners, really don't understand Redux. But anyways, just bear with me, guys. So connect is, I like to think of it as a bridge between your React application and the Redux state. Okay, it acts as a bridge. And map state to prop function, it acts as a vehicle that transports the data, all right, to your application. So let's import that. Let's import connect from React Redux. All right, and here we need, instead of display to do, we need to say connect, and in the first parenthesis we need to add map state to props, and in our second parenthesis this is gonna be display to do. Okay, which is basically our component. Okay, now with the help of connect, the bridge between the state and the Redux state and your React application is built. All right, all you need to do is now transport those state in your React application. Now the transporting is done with the help of this function, map state to props. Okay, you can name it anything that you want, but for convenience we have named it map state to props. All right, so let's define that. So const map state to props. The props is going to be an arrow function, and it's going to take state as an argument. So let's open that up, and this is basically going to return an object. Now inside this object we're going to create a property called to do's, and this is going to be nothing but state dot to do's. All right, and state dot to do's is nothing but this right here, and it's actually being passed to this to do's, and this to do's we can actually use it as a prop here. All right, and that's the meaning of map state to prop. The state of your Redux, right, the state that is present inside the store of your Redux can actually be used as a prop in your React application. So here if you say props, all right, and here let me just console.log props dot to do's. Let's save that. Let's go here and inspect it. It's saying cannot read property to do's of undefined. So right now state is actually undefined, so the state that is coming from this restore right here is undefined, so the problem's probably in our store. Okay, let's go to reducer. Oh man, I actually created state and also created initial state. However, I haven't actually initialized this state to initial state, and I think this will be solved. Yep, there you go. And now if you actually look here, I do have, yep, learn Angular, learn React, and learn Vue, the initial state. All right, I actually got this as a prop, and that is what I meant by map state to props. Now I can use this in order to display it here. So for that I'm going to use a map function. So instead of this learn Redux, let's just say props dot to do's dot map, and for each to do you're gonna return and now I'm gonna return a component, and this is gonna be show to do. All right, and I'm gonna pass key equals to do dot id, and I'm also going to pass the to do itself. So to do equals to do dot to do. Okay, because this to do is an object, and inside that we also have the to do, which is this learn Angular, learn React, learn Vue. All right, and let's just close this component, and since we have not created that, let's create it. So import show to do from /show to do dot js. All right, we're gonna get an error, doesn't matter at this point. So show to do dot js, say rfc let me export default here, show to do. And since we actually have sent our to do as a prop, okay, we're gonna get it here, and here we're just gonna display that. So h3 props dot to do, h3, right? There you go. Learn React, learn Angular, and learn Vue. Okay, so let me actually add a class name here, set that to empty3. Let's also create a border, save that. All right, and also a padding of 3. Okay, so learn React, learn Angular, learn Vue. So with the help of connect and with the help of map state to props, we were actually able to get the state that is present inside the store in our React application. All right, so basically connect works as a bridge, acts as a bridge, all right, with and it is present in our React-Redux library. Okay, and this is how you create the connection, and a map state to props will actually help you use the state that is present inside the store as a prop in your React application. All right, so this is how actually you can get the value that is present inside the store. Okay, so now next thing I want to do is whatever to do that I write here, I want to actually add this inside our state as well. All right, so let's go to create to do here. Now whatever that I write here inside our input field, I need a variable in order to track whatever I write here. All right, so in this component I need to create a state just for this component, because I don't want to create some variable like that in my Redux and call that in order to just for this simple task. All right, so let me convert this functional component into a class-based component, because I don't want to use hooks right now. So class create to do extends react dot component, right, and it needs to run a render method. Inside that render method we're going to return everything. All right, now let me create a state equals, it's an object, and inside that we're going to build a property. We're going to create a property, and that will be track input, and this is actually going to store whatever we are typing here. All right, so for in the beginning it's going to be null, and let me add an event here in our input field saying on change. Equals to, and we're going to say this. So whenever we type anything or do any changes in here inside this field, we're going to call a method, and that's going to say that method's going to be change input, something like that. All right, this dot. So let's call that method here and say change input equals, and this gonna actually get an event object, say, and all we need to do here is actually change this track input to whatever we're typing here. Okay, and that is basically present in our e.target.value. So we're gonna call this dot set state. Now this is basic React, okay, this is not Redux. I wanted to do is because I still want to create this application, right? And say track input, the value that we want to change, and we want to change that track, and we want to change that with e.target.value. All right, now let's save that. I hope this works. If I go to inspect here, let's see, if I go to components, and if I go to create to do, and I think that we have a state called track input. Now if I type anything here, as you can see, the value inside the track input also changes. All right, Okay, so far so good. So now we are actually saving whatever we are typing here inside our track input. And the next thing is, when we hit the submit button, we want to send this new to do in our state, all right, that is present inside the store. Let's create another event in our form here, say on submit equals, and here we're going to call a method called let's say submit to do, something like that. So submit to do, and let's create that here. Submit to do equals, it's gonna take event as a parameter. The first thing that we're gonna do is prevent the default behavior of this form. Okay, so e dot prevent default, so that it does not refresh whenever we hit the submit button. All right, now our to do is actually present inside in this property, right? Now we need to prepare the value that you want to send as an action, right? Because action itself consists of type and a value, right? So that value we have to create it now. So if you go to to-do reducer here, the values are like this. Okay, it has an ID and a to-do. Okay, this to-do is present inside this track input, all right? And for the ID, we're going to use an external dependency called unique ID for that, all right, because we do want the ID to be unique. Okay, so let's go here and say const value equals to, let this be an object. The first property would be ID, and we're gonna again, as I said, we're gonna use a dependency called unique ID. So all you have to do is say npm install unique unique ID, all right? And if you enter, the unique ID will be installed, all right? And I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to call it right here. So import unique ID from unique ID, and what this does is just actually creates a unique ID. Okay, so here you can say unique ID, and that will eventually create a unique ID for you. And for the to do, we're going to pass this right here. Okay, this dot state dot track input. So let's say this dot state dot track input. All right, so now since after we created our value, we need to create an action. So const action, because if you actually refer to that slide, the first I showed earlier, I said that when you hit a button you have to create an action, right? So we are actually going through that flow. All right, so we're going to create an action. The first thing action gonna have is a type. Okay, and since we are actually adding the to do, we're gonna say add. All right, and the second thing action gonna contain is the value. All right, now in general terms we actually write payload instead of value. All right, so you can actually write value if you want, doesn't matter. So here we're gonna send value, which is this value. All right, so there you go, our action is also created. Now if you can recall that slide again, we said that after action we need to dispatch that action to the store, okay, or send that action to the store, both. But we can't use dispatch and just send that action, something like that, okay, because dispatch is it won't recognize, the compiler won't recognize what is dispatch. So what we're going to do again is connect this create to do with our state. So we're going to use import connect from React-Redux, right? And here instead of create to do, we're going to say connect, and we're going to say, and here the first parameter is going to be null, and the second parameter is going to be map, and this time it's going to be dispatch to props. All right, and we're also gonna need component which is create to do. All right, so now the connection is done. Now we need to actually define map dispatch to props. So const map dispatch to props, right, equals, now this is gonna take, instead of state, this is gonna take dispatch, right, this time. And this dispatch, everything here is coming because we have actually enclosed everything inside the provider. All right, that's why we are actually being able to use state as well as dispatch here. So this function will return, and here we're going to add a property called add to do. And remember, this property we can actually use it as a prop. All right, and this will basically be a function, because what we're going to do is call this add to do here. All right, and pass this action property inside that add to do. Okay, so that action variable will actually get that here. All right, we can actually grab that here, and what you can do is just simply run a dispatch function. All right, and inside that we can simply write action, and here we're gonna say this dot props dot add to do, and inside the parentheses we're gonna send action. All right, that action actually comes here, and then it gets dispatched. All right, so if you save this, so everything is working. Now we do need to change something here in our to-do reducer, because we actually have not created anything for that action type if the type is add. All right, because in our create to do, if you see the action, the type is add here. Okay, so we're gonna create we need to add that value in our to-dos as well. So we're gonna add a case here, case add. For now we're gonna just check if everything is actually working. So console.log, we're gonna say added. Right, let's save that. Let's just enter, I don't know, learn. Let me also open the console. Let's say learn Java. All right, now if you submit, now as you can see, it's actually console logging added. Okay, which means this is working, and everything that we coded right here is also working. All right, so now to do reducer, instead of this console log added, what you're going to do is just add the value inside our to-dos. Okay, and that value is inside action.payload. Remember, it's payload. All right, and not value. So what you're going to do is just return object.assign. This is basically going to contain 3 parameters. First one is an empty object. The second one will be our state, right? And the third one will also be an object, and inside that object we need a property that you want to change. Here we want to change to-dos. All right, so to-dos, and you're going to set that to state dot to-dos dot concat, because we're basically adding the object right here. All right, so and that value is actually present in our action dot payload. Okay, because if you go here and see, we have a value as a payload. All right, and this value is basically an object, and that value along with all these values is going to be added in our to-dos. All right, and this to-dos is going to be added in the object, and that object is going to get returned. Okay, so it's gonna, reducer is actually returning the new object, as I said earlier. So if I save this, so let's see if this is working. All right, so let's say learn Ember. If I hit submit, and there you go, it's actually working. All right, if I say learn node, if I submit, and if I say learn express, if I say enter, and there you go. So the create functionality is already working. All right, so I hope you understood up to this much. Okay, so here we did like we were doing in our display to do. Okay, we imported the connect, we connected it here. All right, and we defined our dispatch, map dispatch to props function. All right, it takes dispatch as an argument, and it returns this add to do, which you can use it as a prop in your React application. All right, and it basically is a function which takes action as a parameter, and it basically dispatches that action. All right, so that's it about the create functionality. Now I do want to also create a delete functionality here. All right, so if I go to show to do here, now here let me create a button, add a class of btn, btn sm, and btn danger. All right, and we're gonna say delete. Let's close that up. Right, let's save that. There you go, we also have the delete button now. Now we're gonna create an event here, so on click. Okay, this one's gonna be on click because it's a button, and when this on click event takes place, we need to call a function, and that function is gonna be, let's say, delete to do, something like that. So let's create that function in here. So function delete to do. Now when we click this button, we also want to send that dispatch method. All right, for that we actually need to connect this component with our store. All right, so import connect from connect. All right, now I hope you guys have now a little bit been familiar with these steps and all those things. So connect, first one would be null, second parameter would be map dispatch to props. All right, and here we also need to add the component which is show to do. All right, this will actually connect Redux store with your React component, and it's saying map dispatch not to props, that because we actually haven't defined that. So let's do that. So const map dispatch to props equals to dispatch. So inside we're gonna return an object. All right, and here we're gonna say delete to do. Okay, and this is, we can actually use it as a prop. All right, this is also going to be a function, and it'll take an action as a parameter. All right, just like previously, and we're going to say dispatch and say action. All right, and here we're first going to create an action, so const action. Now in Redux there are lots of ways to do the same thing. All right, instead of just hard coding action, you also have something called action creators. Okay, and you can do that with the help of that, but if I do that, then it's gonna look more complicated, and I don't want to complicate things. All right, so I'm just creating action just like this. All right, so the first things it's gonna need is a type, and that will be this time delete. Right, and the next thing it will need is, oops, it's not going to be equals to, it's going to be colon, and next thing it's going to need is a value. Okay, and this time it's not going to be an object or something like that, it's just going to be an ID. All right, because with the help of that ID, we're gonna need to delete that object. All right, and that ID we can get through props. Okay, because remember, in our display to do, we are sending the to do. All right, but we can also send the ID. Now this key cannot be considered as a prop, so we're gonna send a separate ID, and that will be equal to to-do.id. all right, save that, and in our show to do, we can actually get that ID through, we can say ID and say props.id. all right, save that. Cannot resolve connect. Oh, sorry about that, it's not going to connect. React Redux. I don't know how and when did I make this mistake, but anyways, okay, so we created an action. Now all we need to do is send that action. All right, so we're gonna use this delete to do right here. So here, let's say we can get the delete to do with the help of props. All right, so props.delete to do, and we're just gonna send action. All right, and again, in our to do reducer, we can add another case of delete. All right, and we're gonna return the same thing, object.assign. It's gonna contain three things. One is an empty object, the second one is the state itself, and the third one is gonna be an object, and inside this object we're gonna add a property that is going to be changed. All right, in this case, again, it's gonna be to-dos, because when you delete something, the values inside the to-dos change. All right, so to-dos, and now we're actually going to use the filter method in order to delete. All right, so we can say state dot to-dos dot filter. All right, and for each to-do, we're going to return that to-do whose to-do.id is not equal to action.payload. Is that action.payload? Let me go to show to do. Oh, I did ID here. It's gonna be payload. Let's go to do reducer. Okay, so basically it's saying we are actually returning from state.todos. Okay, from all this right here, we will be returning a to do, okay, whose ID is not equal to action.payload. All right, and action.payload is basically this ID, the ID of that object or that element whose button we clicked. All right, so let's just save that, and nothing is being shown here. What? Oh, actually, because I added a parenthesis. You don't add a parenthesis. All right, so now let's check that out. Okay, so they're actually the delete process is also working. So basically what we did was in our, where is it? Yeah, show to do, we added a listener in our button, all right, which is delete to do. Okay, so every time you click this delete to do will run, right? So then we created an action of type delete, okay, and payload of props.id, and the props.id is basically the ID of the component or ID of that object which we are deleting. All right, and we are calling this delete to do, okay, and passing this action here. Now this delete to do, which is right here, will dispatch this action. All right, and in our to do reducer, we get that action, and that reducer will check whether the action type is add or delete. In this case it is delete, and it will run this. Okay, and this basically what it does is that for all the to-dos, all right, for each object it will check the ID, and it will return those objects whose ID is not equal to the ID that we have sent through the action. All right, and to that procedure the delete function will work. All right, so if I delete it, if I say learn redux, again it's created, and again it's deleted. All right, so yeah guys, I mean that I think that is it that I want to show you about this application. All right, and that's it about the things that I wanted to show you and things that I wanted to explain about Redux. And again, if you think that this was a bit overwhelming for you and a bit confusing, don't worry, because Redux itself is really confusing for everyone. Okay, and it's hardly unlikely to, you know, kind of get everything in one go. So it will take time. Okay, if you've understood even a little bit, then that's really awesome. Just keep on doing these things, because for the boilerplate and all those, creating the setup, it really takes a little bit in order to get hang of it. Okay, but once you're through that process, you know, Redux is very helpful in lot of applications. Okay, and it's a really great tool. So yeah, that's it guys. I hope you like this crash course. If you've liked this, then do comment down below, do share and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in my next crash course.